أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وما خلقت الجن والإنس إلا ليعبدون. Viewers, I have recited the verse of Holy Quran, Surah Zariyat, verse number 56, in which Allah Almighty says, I have not created the jinn and human beings except for my worship. Which means Allah Almighty is addressing that I have created the jinn and human beings just to worship me. There is no another purpose of these two creatures. In this respect, our Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, said that Allah Almighty says in Hadith Qudsi, O my true slaves, worship me and enjoy my bounties that I have blessed into the world and after the world. It's mean in next world, hereafter. According to Hadith Qudsi, Allah Almighty is saying to his slave that worship me and enjoy the bounties and blessings that I have blessed you in this world, and in this return I will also bless you hereafter at the day of judgment, when we will be accountable and our deeds will be measured. In this respect, our Holy Prophet said, the best and highest slave of Allah Almighty is those who have love and embraced worship of Allah Almighty. They obey God with their body parts and place the love of Allah Almighty in their hearts. Then, after doing that, they are not worried about their difficulties or troubles and their ease. It means our Holy Prophet said, the best and highest slave of Allah Almighty is that who worship Allah Almighty with his own body parts and keeps the love of Allah Almighty in their hearts. The worship with body parts, it means that we will have to obey the Allah Almighty. Our all body parts must be under the command of Allah Almighty. For example, we will have to utilize our body parts according to the will of Allah Almighty. We will have to know where I have to use my hand. We will have to know that where I have to watch. We will have to know that what is to say for me. We have to know what is that to hear. It means we will have to use our body parts according to the will of Allah. And our Holy Prophet said, when the person will do that, then he will not be worried about his trouble and his ease. It means if a true slave, when he will worship Allah Almighty, then it's the responsibility of Allah Almighty to provide him all his blessings and bounties in this world and afterward. It means the true slave will deserve its return. Once again, in this respect, Hazrat Ali alayhi salam said, worship is a real success. It means when we will embrace worship, when we will worship Allah Almighty, then we will get the success. What's the meaning of success? When we will worship Allah Almighty, we will get success in this world and after this world, this life and after life. Condition is that we will have to worship of Allah Almighty. And in this respect, once again, Hazrat Ali alayhi salam said, when Allah Almighty loves His slave, loves His man, then Allah Almighty inspired and venerated a passion into him that he worship Allah Almighty and obey His commands. It means this is the symbol of true slave, that if he is a true Muslim, he is a true slave of Allah Almighty, then Allah Almighty will inspire, crystallize a passion into him that he will worship to Allah Almighty. It means when we are ready to worship, or we are busy, or we are doing worship of Allah Almighty, it's also the blessing of Allah Almighty. Once again, in this respect, Hazrat Ali alayhi salam said, continuous worship is a clear proof of success. It means there should be continuity to do worship. We will have to worship regularly. We cannot stop it for some time. We will have to continue it. And next, our Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, said, to worship in loneliness is to get the treasuries of benefits. The best worship is when we worship lonely, when we are alone, when we will remember Allah Almighty and worship. It's the best worship. May Allah Almighty bless us the good efforts to worship Him, so that we can get its reward and award on the Day of Judgment. And it's also our responsibility, a religious obligation, to pay thanks in the court of Allah Almighty, because He has created us, and it's our religious obligation to pay thanks, and the best way of thanks is to worship Allah Almighty. May Allah Almighty bless us the good efforts to worship Him. Ameen.